Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into a book that's really shifted perspectives on communication and persuasion. It's Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it, by Chris Voss.
Absolutely. And Voss's background is just fascinating, isn't it? Going from, a regular police officer in Kansas City to becoming the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator.
It really is. It gives his insights such incredible real-world weight.
Exactly. It's not just theory developed in a lab somewhere. This stuff was tested where the stakes couldn't be higher.
And that's central to the book's core idea, right? He really challenges that traditional negotiation wisdom, the kind focused purely on rational arguments.
He does. He argues pretty convincingly, I think, that negotiation is much more about emotional intelligence and understanding, human psychology. Less logic, more emotion.
Which is perfect for our listeners, the learners, because this deep dive aims to pull out those actionable insights, things you can use in everyday life, not just hostage situations, thankfully.
Definitely. It's about effective communication, understanding people better, really practical stuff.
So our mission today is to really unpack Voss's approach, distill the most important elements, and give you, the listener, some practical takeaways to, enhance how you understand and influence interactions.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start? With that shift away from rationality.
Yeah, let's tackle that first. Voss really takes aim at the rational actor model, the kind popularized by classics like getting to yes.
Right, the idea that people make decisions based purely on logic and self-interest. Voss basically says, hold on, that's not how humans actually operate.
He argues we're driven much more by emotions, unconscious biases, things happening below the surface.
Exactly. And because of that, he reframes negotiation entirely. It's not a battle to win or even just a problem to solve logically. It's a process of discovery.
Discovering what the other side really wants or needs beyond just their stated position.
Precisely. It's about uncovering those hidden drivers. And that leads right into the book's title, Never Split the Difference.
Which is so provocative. We're always told compromise is good, find the middle ground.
But Voss argues that splitting the difference often means both sides are settling for less than they could have achieved. It can be, lazy negotiating, leading to suboptimal outcomes for everyone.
And he has the results to back it up, right? The FBI's success rate in hostage situations jumped dramatically during his time.
Yeah, from roughly 50% to over 90%. That's a staggering improvement. It really underscores that these methods, focusing on psychology and emotion, are incredibly effective, even when lives are literally on the line.
So digging a bit deeper into why the rational actor model falls short, what's the core argument there?
Well, Voss leans heavily on behavioral economics, neuroscience. Basically, the science shows our decisions are deeply intertwined with our emotions. We might think we're being logical, but often feelings are in the driver's seat.
So strategies that ignore that emotional layer are just incomplete.
Exactly. They miss the main arena where the negotiation is actually happening. He talks about his FBI training at Harvard Law School, which is a great example.
Oh, right, where they went up against the Harvard students in simulations.
Yeah. The Harvard students used all the traditional logic-based tactics taught in business schools. Voss's FBI team focused on building emotional connections, using empathy.
And they performed better.
Consistently. It really cemented his belief that understanding and navigating the emotional landscape was key.
Which brings us neatly to tactical empathy. What exactly is that? Is it just being nice?
Not quite. It's more strategic than just general empathy. Tactical empathy means actively working to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, their mindset.
Okay.
But with the specific goal of gaining insight and building influence. You're acknowledging their worldview to see where they're coming from.
So it's understanding for strategic advantage, not just understanding for its own sake.
Precisely. It's not about agreeing with them or getting caught up in their emotions yourself. It's about using that understanding to build trust and guide the conversation. Voss has that great quote, effective negotiation is applied people reading.
Applied people reading. I like that. It's active, not passive.
Right. And a key tool for creating the right atmosphere for this is that late night FM DJ voice he talks about.
Ah, yes. The voice. What's the psychology behind that?
It's all about projecting calm, control, and confidence. Speaking slowly, deliberately, in a downward inflecting tone. It naturally de-escalates tension.
It makes you sound unflappable.
Exactly. It soothes the other person, makes them feel less threatened, and encourages them to listen more openly. It sort of lowers the emotional temperature.
Okay, so setting the stage with the right tone, focusing on empathy. This leads to some of his core rules for negotiation, doesn't it?
Yeah, he lays out some foundational principles. We've touched on the big one. Negotiation is emotional, not logical.
Right.
Then listening is more important than speaking. You learn more by shutting up and paying attention.
Makes sense.
Third, your success really hinges on understanding how the other side sees things. Their perception is their reality.
Got it.
And finally, this idea that pretty much every interaction we have is a negotiation on some level.
That's a big one. It widens the scope massively.
It does. It means these skills aren't just for big deals, they're for everyday conversations too.
Okay, so based on those principles, let's get into some specific techniques. Mirroring sounds almost too simple.
It does, doesn't it? Just repeating the last few words someone said, like the last 3 words, or the critical 1 to 3 words.
Yeah. How does that actually work?
Well, the neuroscience behind it is fascinating. Apparently, it triggers this subconscious process of bonding. It signals, I'm listening, I'm like you, I understand, which builds rapport and trust almost automatically.
So it encourages them to keep talking, to elaborate without you even asking a direct question.
Exactly. It's a gentle prod for them to expand on their thoughts. Voss mentions using it in a really tense hostage situation in the Philippines.
How did it help there?
Just by mirroring some key phrases the hostage takers used, it helped calm things down, build a sliver of connection, and open the door for actual communication to diffuse the immediate tension.
Incredible. So practically speaking, how do you do it effectively?
Voss gives a simple framework. First, use that calm, late-night FM DJ voice.
Okay, the voice again.
Always the voice. Then maybe start with a softening phrase like, I'm sorry, or pardon me, but though not always necessary. Then just repeat those key 1-3 words, or the last 3 words.
And then?
Silence. Wait. At least 4 seconds. That pause is crucial. It gives them space to reflect and fill the silence, often revealing more. Then repeat if needed.
So it's not robotic parroting. It requires real listening to pick the right word.
Absolutely. You have to be engaged, understanding what's important and what they're saying. He gives a business example too, right? A real estate deal.
Yeah, where mirroring helped uncover the seller's real sticking point, which wasn't what they initially said.
Right, showing it works in everyday deals too, not just life or death scenarios.
Okay, moving from mirroring to labeling. How does that build on the process?
Labeling is where you actively identify and name the emotion you sense in the other person. You verbalize their feeling.
How do you phrase that? You don't just say, you seem angry, do you?
Usually not that direct. You frame it as an observation. Like, it looks like this is frustrating you. Using seems, sounds, looks like, softens it.
And Voss makes a distinction here between emotional and cognitive empathy, right?
Yes, a crucial one. Emotional empathy is feeling with them, getting caught up. Cognitive empathy is understanding what they're feeling and why, without necessarily experiencing it yourself. For negotiation, cognitive empathy used in labeling is the goal.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because labeling, based on cognitive empathy, helps you manage the interaction strategically. By naming a negative emotion, you actually help diffuse it. Naming a positive one reinforces it. It validates their feeling without you having to agree with the reason behind it.
Can you give an example?
He mentions using it in bank robberies. It seems like you're worried about getting caught, or in big corporate deals. But the really powerful one was labeling a kidnapper's fear.
What happened there?
By saying something like, it sounds like you're afraid of what happens if you let the hostage go. It directly addressed the unspoken fear, built trust, and created a breakthrough. It showed understanding without judgment.
Wow. And he even says getting the label wrong can be useful.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? If you mislabel, they'll often jump in to correct you. No, it's not that, it's more like this. And boom, they've just given you more accurate information about their emotional state.
Okay, so mirroring encourages them to talk. Labeling validates their emotions. Now let's talk about no. This feels like a big departure from traditional advice.
It really is. We're usually so focused on getting to yes. Voss flips that. He argues that no is often more powerful.
How so?
Because saying no gives the other person a feeling of safety and control. When someone feels they have the option to refuse, they relax. Paradoxically, this makes them more open to actually considering your proposal later.
So no isn't the end of the conversation, it's the start.
Often, yes. Voss sees no serving several valuable functions. It protects people from making bad decisions, it allows them to assert autonomy, it slows things down, and it helps uncover the real sticking points. A quick yes can sometimes hide unresolved issues.
He has that great example of cold calling CEOs, doesn't he?
Right. Instead of asking, do you have a few minutes? Which pressures them towards yes, he asks, is now a bad time to talk?
Which invites a no.
Exactly.
Yep.
And if they say, no, it's not a bad time, they've implicitly agreed to talk. If they say, yes, it is, they feel respected, and you can easily ask for a better time. It diffuses the initial resistance.
Clever. Are there other no-oriented questions, he suggests?
Yeah, things like, is it a ridiculous idea to suggest, or have you given up on this project? That one often prompts a defensive, no, of course not, which reaffirms their commitment. Or even, is it unreasonable if we? These let them push back safely.
Okay, so using mirroring, labeling, and even embracing no strategically, all this seems to be building towards one specific response Voss really values.
Yes, that's right. For Voss, this is the magic phrase. It's the sign that the other person feels completely and totally understood by you.
How is it different from just yes, or even you're right?
Yes can be a simple confirmation, sometimes given just to move on. You're right can actually be dismissive, like, okay, whatever, you win that point, let's move on. But that's right, that comes from a deeper place. It signals genuine agreement and a feeling of being heard on their terms.
It's like an epiphany moment for them. This person actually gets me.
Exactly. It creates a real bond and makes them much more receptive to finding a solution together.
So how do you get there? How do you elicit that's right?
It's basically a three-step process, using the tools we've discussed. First, active listening, using mirroring and silence. Second, labeling their emotions effectively. Third, paraphrasing their points back to them, not just the emotions, but the substance of their argument, their perspective, in a concise summary.
So you mirror, you label, and then you summarize their position and feelings accurately.
Precisely. And when you nail that summary, articulating their viewpoint, perhaps even better than they could themselves, that's when you often hear,
that's right.
And Voss provides examples where this was the turning point, right? Hostage situations, business deals, even personal arguments.
Yes, he shows its power across the board. Achieving that moment of that's right fundamentally shifts the dynamic.
Okay, so once you've established that deep understanding, that connection signaled by, that's right, Voss then talks about actively influencing their perception or bending their reality. What does that involve?
This is about subtly shaping how the other side sees the potential outcomes and the value of different options, but importantly, without deception.
How do you do that?
One key technique involves anchors, but used strategically. He emphasizes using precise, non-round numbers.
A specific number like $9,850 sounds like it's based on careful calculation and thought, making it seem more credible and firm than a round number, which can feel arbitrary or easily negotiable. He also talks about using extreme anchors to shift the perceived zone of possible agreement.
What other tactics fall under bending reality?
He discusses leveraging loss aversion. People fear losses more than they value equivalent gains. So framing things in terms of what they stand to lose can be very motivating.
Okay.
Also, labeling their pain or difficulty, saying something like, I know this is a big ask, can actually make them more willing to help. It acknowledges their effort.
Interesting. What else?
Managing the perception of time with deadlines, sometimes real, sometimes implied, and critically, using calibrated how. Questions like, how am I supposed to do that? This pushes back on unreasonable demands by forcing them to consider your constraints.
It sounds like it's about shaping the context of the negotiation.
Yes, and a huge part of that is managing perceptions of fairness. People need to feel the process is fair, even if the outcome isn't perfectly equal. Mentioning fairness explicitly can help anchor that perception.
Which leads us back to those calibrated questions, especially starting with how and what. You mentioned, how am I supposed to do that? How else are these used to create an illusion of control?
Right. The idea is to give them the feeling of being in control while you're actually guiding the process. How and what questions achieve this beautifully?
Why are they better than why? Questions.
Why? Questions often sound accusatory, like, why did you do that? Or why do you want that? It puts people on the defensive immediately.
Okay, makes sense.
But how and what questions are different. They invite collaboration and problem solving. They ask for help in figuring things out.
Can you give some more examples?
Sure. Instead of demanding something, ask, how would you like me to proceed? Or to understand the situation better, what is it that brought us to this point? To focus on solutions. How can we solve this problem together?
And the Haiti example. Asking about proof of life.
Yeah, instead of demanding prove the victim is alive, which could escalate things, asking, how do I know the victim is alive? Put the onus on the kidnappers to figure out how to satisfy that need, giving them a sense of control over the process.
So these questions are versatile, diffusing demands, uncovering information, managing tricky people.
Absolutely. They get the other side engaged in finding solutions, often solutions that align with what you need without feeling like they've been forced into it.
Let me guess. Use the late-night FM DJ voice.
You got it. Calm, controlled delivery is key when asking these potentially challenging questions.
Okay, so you've used all these techniques, you've reached an agreement, but Voss says that's not the end. You need to guarantee execution.
Exactly. Getting the yes, or even the that's right, is only half the battle. Making sure it actually happens is crucial.
How do you gauge if someone is truly committed?
He brings up the 7-38-55 rule. It reminds us that words only convey 7% of meaning. Tone of voice is 38%, and body language is a huge 55%. So you need to listen and watch for inconsistencies between words, tone, and nonverbals, which might signal hesitation.
So pay attention to the whole picture, not just the words.
Right. Then there's the rule of 3. Try to get them to agree to the same thing in 3 different ways during the conversation.
How does that work?
Maybe they agree verbally, then you summarize it and they confirm, that's right. And then perhaps you ask a how question about implementation, like, how should we handle the first step? Getting that consistency builds commitment.
He also mentions the Pinocchio effect.
Yeah, the observation that people who are being less than truthful often use more words, more complex sentences, and more third-person pronouns trying to distance themselves. It's not foolproof, but it's something to watch for.
So what specific tactics can you use to ensure follow-through?
Ask detailed how and what questions about implementation. What are the next steps? How will we know we're on track? What challenges do you foresee? Get them involved in planning the execution. Summarize the plan clearly. Asking, how will we address problems if they arise, is also smart.
It's about making the agreement concrete and actionable.
Precisely. Turning the yes into reality.
Now, sometimes, despite all the empathy and rapport building, you end up in a straight-up hard bargaining situation. Does Voss offer tools for that, too?
He does. For those distributive negotiations where it feels like a zero-sum game, he introduces the Ackerman model. It's a very specific system for making counteroffers.
Okay, how does the Ackerman model work?
It's quite structured. First, you set your target price. Then your first offer is way down at about 65% of that target.
65%? That seems low.
It's meant to be an extreme anchor. Then you make calculated increases, maybe to 85%, then 95%, then finally 100% of your target. But crucially, before each increase, you use empathy and various ways of saying no to signal reluctance.
So you don't just jump up quickly?
No, you make them work for it. And your final offer should be a precise, non-round number, like we discussed before. And maybe throw in a small non-monetary item at the very end to show you've absolutely reached your limit.
That sounds psychologically quite sophisticated.
It is. It uses anchoring, reciprocity, and the power of specific numbers. Beyond Ackerman, he also advises on how to handle aggressive tactics.
Like what?
Use labeling to diffuse their aggression. It seems like you're feeling very strongly about this. If they try good cop, bad cop, call it out gently. It seems like one of you is taking a harder line while the other is more accommodating. Use calibrated questions to push back on deadline pressure. What happens if we don't meet this deadline?
And even in these tough spots, he brings up black swans.
Yes, the idea that there might still be hidden information that could change everything, even in hard bargaining.
Let's unpack that a bit more. Finding the black swan, this sounds like the ultimate negotiation discovery.
It really is. Black swans are those unknown unknowns, pieces of information you didn't even know existed, but which, once revealed, can completely reshape the negotiation. They're game changers.
How are they different from just regular leverage?
Voss talks about 3 types of leverage. Positive, your ability to provide what they want. Negative, your ability to inflict pain. And normative, using their norms or standards against them. Black swans operate outside of this. They often relate to hidden motivations, constraints, or beliefs you weren't aware of.
Can you give an example?
The classic one from the book is a hostage situation where the critical piece of information of the black swan was that the kidnapper secretly craved media attention and fame. Knowing that completely changed the negotiation strategy.
Wow. So how do you actively hunt for these black swans? They sound pretty elusive.
It requires intense curiosity and observation. Voss suggests getting face time whenever possible to read body language and catch unguarded moments.
Makes sense.
Listen very carefully for inconsistencies or things that don't quite add up. Explore topics that seem irrelevant. Sometimes the key lies off the beaten path. Look for patterns in their behavior, their responses. Pay attention to the team on the other side, who guards whom, who defers to whom.
So it's about deep listening and looking beyond the surface issues.
Exactly. He mentions a business merger where the black swan was the CEO's personal desire to secure his legacy before retiring, something completely unrelated to the deal's finances, but crucial to closing it. There aren't always dramatic secrets. Sometimes there's subtle insights into what truly matters to the other person.
It's about continuous discovery right to the end.
Always be learning. Always be looking for that hidden piece.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Never Split the Difference. It's clear Chris Voss offers such a powerful toolkit grounded in, real psychology and proven in extreme situations.
Absolutely. The big takeaways really are the power of understanding emotions through tactical empathy, the value of deep listening, using tools like mirroring and labeling, knowing how and when to use no strategically, aiming for that's right moment.
And then using calibrated questions to shape perception and, of course, always hunting for those black swans.
Exactly. And the beauty is these aren't just for FBI negotiators. They're skills you can apply in salaried professions, buying a car, dealing with your kids, pretty much any interaction where you want to understand and influence outcomes.
It really reframes negotiation, doesn't it? Less about conflict and compromise, more about connection and uncovering solutions that work better for everyone involved. It's about getting beyond just splitting the difference.
A perfect way to put it. It's about smarter, more human interaction.
To grab a copy of Never Split the Difference, check out the link in the description.
It's definitely worth the read.
And subscribe to Books and Bytes for more deep dives into insightful reads.